Have you ever noticed how certain men always seem to return, as if something unseen keeps pulling them back, even after a moment of intimacy that appeared to be the final goodbye? What if I told you that there exists a quiet, nearly invisible, yet extraordinarily powerful presence that draws them back? And what if that force has absolutely nothing to do with charming words or how you performed in bed, but instead with something far more profound, something timeless and inwardly transformative? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in 20th century psychology, might say that this hidden force resides not in the external, but in the invisible dimension of the psyche, in how you relate to your own essence after the moment has passed. He believed that within each of us lies an unconscious current, a silent force that drives our choices, our longings, and above all, the bonds we form at the soul level. And it's within this subtle, unseen space that the real magnetism is born, a kind of energy so pure that, when consciously awakened, becomes almost impossible for anyone to resist or forget. Jung spent his life diving deep into the mysteries of the soul, especially the way it connects, yearns, and merges with another. To him, intimacy was never just a physical act. It was the profound collision of two unconscious realms. Each gesture, each lingering look, each moment of silence. They are more than what they appear to be, each one a living symbol, carrying emotional resonance far beyond what logic can touch. When you share a moment of deep intimacy with someone, it's not just the body that opens, it's the unconscious, the hidden chambers of your psyche that get laid bare. And it's from that place that everything meaningful begins. But here's the paradox. If after such a sacred opening, you fall into panic, anxiety, or the compulsive need to control, if you drown in insecurity or obsessively crave reassurance, even if it's not spoken, the other person will feel it. Not with his rational mind, but through a primal, unconscious sensing. He picks up on that fear, that hunger, that lack. But something miraculous happens if instead, you shift your attention inward, if you embrace your emotions gently, if you really listen to yourself, with patience and deep respect, you become something else, a mirror clean, steady, revealing. You reflect to him what he cannot yet see in himself, and that is what makes a connection unforgettable. If this reflection speaks to something deep within you, subscribe to Carl Jung Women, where we hold space for truth, healing, and quiet transformation. Jung spoke of a vital concept called individuation, the sacred journey toward becoming the most authentic version of yourself. And that journey always, without fail, passes through the crucible of intimacy. Ask yourself, do you give your heart to someone only to lose your center, waiting for texts, craving confirmation, begging for love in disguise? If so, you're surrendering the most sacred thing you possess, your individuality, your deep-rooted inner sovereignty. But when you choose silence, not as manipulation, not as punishment, but as an act of soulful return, when you pause, listen deeply, allow space to feel, you send a message that no words could ever carry. I am whole, even without you. And that message, quiet, still, unspoken, shakes the unconscious of anyone who receives it. Because most people have never met someone who is whole in solitude. Most people are running from silence. But when they come across someone who is anchored in it, who thrives in it, they feel drawn, pulled by something they don't yet understand. That pull is not neediness. It is gravity. It is power. Your silence becomes more articulate than 1,000 pleas. Your absence becomes more present than all those who cling just to be seen. Jung's research on anima and animus, The feminine and masculine energies within every soul offers a window into this. He showed how we project what we lack onto the people we love. How a man, especially, projects his anima, his emotional, intuitive side, onto a woman. But because he has been raised to suppress that side, he doesn't know how to access it on his own. So when he stands next to a woman who is centered, who doesn't lean on his approval to feel secure, he feels something open. He may not know why, but he knows he needs to return. Because near you, he feels contact with a version of himself he's never met before. Your presence becomes a portal, a way back to a sleeping part of his soul. And that creates a memory not of your face, your body, or your voice, but of how he felt around you. Not attraction, not desire, something deeper. It is the emotional state awakened by the way you held yourself after intimacy. That is the part that stays. Let's take it further. When a man pulls away after closeness and finds on the other end a woman who doesn't chase, who doesn't demand, who doesn't go cold either, something sacred begins to stir inside him. He feels silence, but not the empty kind. It's silence filled with presence, silence dignified, electric, unnerving. This is the encounter with the shadow, the part of the self we deny, the darkness we suppress. When he begins to feel longing, regret, fear, he's not reacting to you. He's confronting himself. Your absence has become a reflection, a mirror that won't flinch. He starts to ask questions, not because you begged, not because you pleaded, but because something old inside him was touched. That something essential, ancient, buried, comes alive because you did one thing. You turned back toward yourself, with reverence, with quiet strength, with dignity. Jung taught that every deep connection is a doorway for healing, but only if it's faced bravely. When you choose to sit with your solitude, your desire, your ache without running, you evolve. You become someone who needs nothing outside herself to feel whole. And wholeness, true wholeness, has a power that no performance can replicate. Men return not because they're addicted to your affection, but because they crave what is real. And nothing is more real than someone rooted in their own truth. So, if you're wondering what to do after intimacy, it's this. Come home, to yourself, tend to your body with tenderness, nurture your heart with patience, sit with your soul in sacred silence. Observe your feelings without judgment. Let yourself feel fully, without trying to fix, because it's in that quiet return, that inward embrace where your true feminine power dwells. And that is the force that draws him back, not because you lured him, but because he never wanted to leave. His soul recognizes the sanctuary it found in your steadiness, even if he can't explain it, even if he fights it, even if the world taught him not to cry, not to feel, not to soften. We are living in a world of men who run from their feelings as if they were threats. Jung said that the things we reject inside ourselves don't vanish. They go underground. They become part of the unconscious. And here's what happens. The woman who does not beg, who does not chase, who does not crumble, but who also does not close her heart, becomes a mirror he cannot ignore. A mirror that shows him the very parts he spent a lifetime burying. And this is why many return. Not for your body, but for your soul. Because in your presence, he finally feels something rare. Not excitement, not validation, but peace and authenticity. Don't confuse this with control. Jung detested manipulation. He believed real transformation happens only when we face ourselves with ruthless honesty. So when we talk about what makes a man come back, we're not talking about strategy, not tricks, not illusions. We're talking about something internal, a posture, a vow, a quiet refusal to abandon yourself. And here's the miracle. That refusal, that dignity awakens something sacred in him, a longing to return to himself, to remember who he really is. Because deep down, we're all exhausted, tired of shallow love, tired of connections that drain. We want truth. We want someone whose silence says, I see you. I respect you. I know your soul is worth more than games. And that kind of connection, it's not common. It's rare. But it changes everything. At Carl Jung Women, we believe in this kind of truth, quiet, courageous, and soul deep. Jung said that relationships act as projection fields. They are spaces where we unconsciously cast our deepest desires, our unresolved traumas, our unspoken fears, and our idealized hopes onto another. And in those moments of intimacy, those projections don't just stay hidden. They intensify. They surface. It's as if, for a few sacred minutes, all veils fall away, and the unconscious, raw, and unfiltered rises fully into the light. That is why what happens after intimacy holds such critical importance, because it is then that everything real begins to unfold. Everything hidden is exposed. In the aftermath, with the mask off, if you act from a place of desperation, if you begin to chase, if you grasp for instant replies or obsessively seek reassurance, he will feel it, not logically, but viscerally. He won't need to explain what's wrong. He'll simply feel the intensity of your need, and it will pull him away. But when, instead, he sees you anchored, whole, still, rooted in your own essence, that image, that energy is what carves itself into memory. That's what stays long after your body is gone. Now imagine this. You share a deeply intimate encounter, and then silence. He disappears. No message, no call, no sign. What do you do in such a painful moment? Most people go into mental overdrive. They replay every detail, revisit every word, dissect every gesture, searching for what went wrong. But what if the answer, the healing, lies in doing the opposite? What if, instead of chasing clarity and anxiety, you held yourself in love? What if you stopped turning outward and instead turned toward your sacred self? Carl Jung taught us the importance of integrating the shadow. In other words, embracing what hurts, rather than rejecting or denying it. When you do this consciously, you generate a rare energetic frequency, a frequency of emotional maturity that radiates quiet strength. And that energy is magnetic, not loud, but powerful. Because at its core, every man who has matured, truly matured, is not seeking to be saved. He is longing for a woman who feels like home, not a hiding place, but a mirror through which he can meet himself. To become that sacred space, you must be rooted deeply in your own self, anchored not in emotion, but in essence. This posture is revolutionary, especially for older men, those who've walked through decades of emotionally draining dynamics, years of unmet expectations, fears of failure in love. When a man in his 50s, 60s, even 70s, encounters a woman who doesn't chase, doesn't plead, but also doesn't shut down, he feels something unfamiliar, something sacred, a silent form of reverence, a warmth that welcomes without possession, a love that doesn't lose itself. Jung believed that this feminine presence had the power to transform a man's very soul. He saw conscious relationships not as emotional comfort zones, but as sacred sites of healing. But that healing only happens when both souls are ready to grow, ready to face themselves. So when you gather yourself with gentleness, with loyalty to your soul, and nourish your inner rituals, When you return to conscious silence, you are extending an invitation, a silent, spiritual offering, not to control, but to invite maturity, to awaken what matters. And that invitation, even when unspoken, echoes through him. One day when he's ready, not before he will feel the call, he will return, not because you persuaded, but because you became unforgettable. Men, for all the armor they wear, do not fear abandonment as much as they fear exposure. Vulnerability terrifies more than loss. Jung once said the greatest fear of man is the fear of truly knowing himself. Because to see yourself, to really see yourself, requires enormous courage. So when you show up in someone's life as a being full of that courage, a woman who faces her fears, who respects herself even after giving deeply, you become a living embodiment of strength. And that kind of strength, authentic and unperformed, is unforgettable. This is not about winning him back. It's not about seduction, clever arguments, or energetic tricks. It's not about dominance. It's about presence. About becoming a sacred space where someone can both rest and rise. A space so rooted in truth that it transforms by simply existing. This is the real alchemy of love. According to Jung, this is where the magic lies. Not in passion alone, but in how intimacy becomes a path to deeper self-awareness. And that transformation, that shift, only occurs when you choose to come home to yourself after intimacy. Not to wait, not to chase, but to return inward. That decision, quiet as it may seem, holds a secret that has always existed. A secret that makes men return, sooner or later. Because what many don't know, or have never allowed themselves to feel, is that coming back to someone after real intimacy is not just a choice. It's a need, an internal pull that surpasses pride and logic. Jung said the psyche is constantly seeking to restore balance. It wants wholeness. It wants truth. And when a man meets someone who shakes him out of superficiality, who opens him up to something raw and real, that experience leaves a permanent mark, even if he tries to forget, even if he distracts himself, even if he forces routine over feeling. That imprint, emotional and unconscious, doesn't vanish, because what he experienced was not a casual moment. It was a glimpse into his own soul through the mirror of your conscious presence. And that is why he returns. Sometimes in days, sometimes in months, but always with the feeling that truth is calling him home. Because truth, once felt, does not let go. But, and this is crucial, that return only happens if you do not interfere. Jung reminds us, true growth demands sacred time, stillness, and yes, pain, the transformative kind. He must feel the ache. He must sit in the echo. He must realize, through longing, what the connection truly meant. If you try to rush this by explaining, demanding, pleading, you steal from him the experience of realization. You answer questions he hasn't even had the courage to ask himself, and that steals the power from the healing. It waters down the truth. But when you remain still, anchored in dignity, when you respect his distance without abandoning your own soul, you create sacred space. You give yourself the protection you need. More than that, you protect your energy. You begin to heal, to grow, to transform. Not because he comes back, but because you return to yourself, and in that completeness, that inner fullness. If he does return, the reunion becomes something else entirely. Not closure, not validation, but evolution. You might be wondering, is this even possible? Yes, but it's not easy. Modern life has conditioned us to panic and stillness, to fear the void, to rush, to grasp, to never let go. But Jung taught us that the void is not a curse. It's a beginning. It's where consciousness awakens, where depth is born. In silence, the soul whispers what the world drowns out. In quiet, the self begins to rise. So after intimacy, do not collapse. Do not chase. Do not beg. Instead, take care of yourself, not out of pride, but out of reverence. Feed your spirit. Do what nourishes your soul from within. Read words that expand you. Walk slowly through the wild. Drink coffee in stillness. Stare at the sky as if it holds answers. Reconnect with those who see your soul. Resurrect dreams you abandoned. Because while you do this, while you tend to yourself, something is happening within him. Invisible, but real. Shifting. Calling him inward. Time is not working against you. It's maturing him, and you. And if he returns, he won't be the same. He'll be softened, more aware, more whole. Maybe for the first time, ready to really meet you. But here's the truth. Not all men return, and that's okay. Because the purpose of this process was never about his return. It was always about your return to yourself. That is the real mirror Jung spoke of. And if the mirror cracks, let it. Study the pieces. They reflect everything you need to see. What did this reveal about you? What awakened inside you? What shadows were brought to light? These are treasures, fragments of self-knowing that can't be taken. So even if he never comes back, you gained something far more important. You saw yourself. You embraced yourself. You became something deeper, and this version of you more aware, more grounded, more whole, will naturally call in others who recognize that same evolution within themselves. Because the truth is lasting. Grounded love cannot grow alongside someone who is still relentlessly fleeing from themselves. A man who is not ready to look inward, to face his shadows, cannot meet you in the depth you deserve. If he hasn't reached that depth yet, then let life shape him at its own rhythm. Don't rush it. Don't try to carry what isn't yours. You don't have to shrink yourself, bend your boundaries, or abandon your soul in the hope that he'll learn to see your worth. You don't need to become smaller just to be understood. It is more than enough to remain fully yourself, to stand tall in who you are, and to keep walking your path with quiet trust and deep inner faith. Carl Jung believed that kindred souls know each other when the time is right. He believed that when two individuals are truly ready, not partially, not momentarily, but fully, the meeting takes place in its own sacred timing. And when it happens, it feels almost magical. But that magic doesn't arise from urgency, not from anxiety, need, or desperation. It's born out of truth, pure, unshaken, internal truth. And that truth doesn't speak loudly. It lives quietly. In the peace of someone who no longer feels the need to prove herself to anyone. So, if you're wondering what to do after intimacy, if you want to respond in a way that changes everything, the answer is simple, yet powerful. Return to yourself. With love, with softness, with strength. Tend to what you feel. Don't judge it. Don't rush it. Honor the fact that you opened. Don't regret your vulnerability. Hold it with care, not shame, and above all, trust. Trust what awakened in that shared moment. Because if what you felt was real, not a fantasy, not a projection, he will feel it too. Not always right away, not always clearly, but something in him will be moved. He may resist it. He may push it away. It may take time for him to truly understand what that experience meant. But eventually, the voice of the soul becomes louder than the ego's pride or the mind's fear. And when that moment arrives, and it does for many, you will not be caught off guard. Because by then, you won't be waiting. You will be someone who does not need anyone, but who chooses consciously and clearly who is worthy of standing beside her. And that inner sovereignty is what Jung called the highest sign of emotional maturity. If what you've heard here touches something real inside you, pause for a moment. Breathe. Look inward with gentle honesty and ask, how many times have I abandoned myself just to hold on to someone else out of fear of being left behind? Now imagine. Imagine a life where you no longer have to beg. Not for love, not for validation, not for respect. That is what Jung invites us into. The courage to be whole. Even when the world tempts us into fragmentation, even when the world demands dependency, this isn't just healing, this is homecoming. A return to the very core of who you've always been, to your essence. When you're no longer searching to be completed, but ready to be reflected. Carl Jung. Women is here, quietly. Subscribe if you're ready to remember who you are.